The gentle afternoon sun cast dancing shadows through the windows of Rosie's Diner, a small restaurant nestled on the edge of Maple Park. A soft breeze drifted through the propped-open doors, carrying with it the distant sounds of children playing on the swings and monkey bars. Dust motes sparkled in the golden light streaming through the glass, creating an almost magical atmosphere in the cozy space. Inside, the familiar sounds of coffee brewing and conversations murmuring filled the restaurant with a kind of comfort that only comes from places where people have been gathering for decades. Lily Grant moved between tables with the practiced grace of someone who'd been carrying plates and refilling coffee cups long enough for it to become second nature. At 29, she wore her uniform, crisp white blouse and practical black slacks beneath a clean apron, like armor that protected her from the world's expectations. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail that never seemed to come undone, no matter how busy the shift became. But it was her eyes that told the real story. Kind eyes that noticed everything and judged nothing. Eyes that had seen enough hardship to recognize it in others and enough kindness to do something about it when she could. Which is why she'd noticed the boy. He came in most afternoons around 3:30, when the lunch rush had died down and the dinner crowd hadn't yet arrived. 8 or 9 years old, wearing a jacket that had clearly belonged to someone bigger once upon a time. The sleeves were rolled up to fit his small arms, and the fabric was worn soft from too many washings. He never ordered anything, just slipped into the corner booth by the window and sat quietly, watching people eat with the kind of focused attention that suggested he was memorizing flavors and textures he couldn't afford to taste. The first time Lily had seen him, she'd assumed he was waiting for someone. A parent running late, maybe? Or a babysitter who'd stepped out to make a phone call. But after 3 days of the same routine, boy arrives alone, sits quietly, leaves after an hour without ordering, she'd begun to understand what she was witnessing, so she'd started making extra. Nothing obvious, nothing that would embarrass the boy or draw attention from other customers. Just an extra sandwich here, a bowl of soup that had somehow been made incorrectly and couldn't be served. Leftovers that would otherwise go in the trash. She'd package them neatly in clean paper bags, tuck in a napkin and plastic fork, and leave them where the boy could find them easily. Never with fanfare, never with explanations or questions about where he lived or why he was alone. Just quiet kindness wrapped in brown paper and placed where small hands could reach it without having to ask for help. The boy understood the game, would wait until Lily was busy with other customers, then slip the bag into his backpack with the kind of stealth that suggested he'd learned to accept help without drawing attention to the fact that help was needed. Neither of them spoke about it. Neither of them needed to, but someone else had been watching. Robert Chen had been coming to Rosie's Diner for 3 weeks, always choosing the table in the far corner where he could observe without being noticed. At 55, he'd learned to see things other people missed, to notice patterns that revealed more about human nature than most people ever realized existed. And what he'd seen was extraordinary. A young woman, clearly struggling with her own challenges. He'd noticed the way she counted tips carefully, the worn shoes that suggested money was tight, the tired expression she wore when she thought no one was looking, sharing what little she had with a child who needed it more. No cameras recording her generosity, no social media posts seeking recognition. No expectation of reward or acknowledgement. Just pure instinctive kindness flowing from someone who understood hunger and chose to ease it for someone else. Robert had been looking for something his entire career, though he hadn't been able to name it until this moment. He'd been searching for proof that goodness existed without audience, that people could be trusted to do the right thing when no one was watching, and he'd found it in a tired waitress who made extra sandwiches for a hungry boy. You're watching this story unfold from wherever you are right now, at home, in a cafe, at your workplace. Leave a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. I love reading every single one of your shares. The confrontation came on a Tuesday, during the kind of busy lunch rush that left everyone frazzled and running behind. Lily was refilling coffee cups and taking orders with the mechanical efficiency that comes from muscle memory, when her manager, Sharon, appeared at her elbow with an expression that meant trouble. "We need to talk," Sharon said in the tone restaurant managers used when they were about to make someone's day significantly worse. Lily felt her stomach drop, But she finished pouring coffee for table 6 before following Sharon to the small office behind the kitchen. "I've been watching you," Sharon began without preamble. "You've been giving away food, don't deny it. I've seen you packaging leftovers and leaving them for that kid who comes in here." Lily's mouth went dry. "It was just food that was going to be thrown away anyway. I didn't think—" "You didn't think about liability issues. You didn't think about health department regulations. You didn't think about the fact that this is a business, not a charity." Sharon's voice was getting louder, carrying the kind of frustration that comes from dealing with thin profit margins and constant pressure to cut costs. "Every sandwich you give away is money out of our pocket. Every bowl of soup you hand out for free is profit we can't afford to lose." Lily tried to explain. "Sharon, it's just, the boy is hungry. I'm not giving away fresh orders, just things that would be wasted otherwise." "It doesn't matter. You're not authorized to make decisions about food distribution. That's not your job." The unfairness of it burned in Lily's chest. She'd been working at Rosie's for 2 years, never missing a shift, never complaining about difficult customers or long hours. She'd covered for other employees, stayed late to help with inventory, done everything asked of her and more. And now she was being reprimanded for feeding a hungry child. "I'm cutting your hours," Sharon announced, "from full-time to part-time. Maybe that'll help you remember that your job is to serve paying customers, not run a soup kitchen." Lily felt the world tilt sideways. Full-time hours were barely enough to cover rent and her daughter's childcare. Part-time hours meant choosing between keeping a roof over their heads and keeping food on their table. "Sharon, please. I have a daughter. I can't afford to lose hours. I'll stop giving food to the boy. I promise." "You should have thought about that before you decided to play Mother Teresa on my dime." That evening, Lily sat at her kitchen table with bills spread in front of her, like accusations. Rent, electric, groceries, her daughter Emma's daycare. Numbers that had been tight with full-time wages and were now impossible with part-time income. She'd been in this position before, too many times. 7 years ago, she'd been a pre-med student at the state university, working toward a degree that would have changed everything for her and her family. But when her mother had been diagnosed with cancer, someone had needed to provide care and income, while insurance companies found new ways to deny coverage. Lily had dropped out to work 2 jobs and care for her mother, had planned to return to school once her mother recovered. But her mother hadn't recovered, and by the time the medical bills were paid and the funeral expenses covered, Lily had been 22 years old with no degree, no savings, and no clear path back to the future she'd planned. Then she'd met David, charming, ambitious David, who'd promised her the world and given her Emma instead. Not that she regretted Emma. Her daughter was the best thing that had ever happened to her. But David had disappeared when the pregnancy test came back positive, leaving Lily to navigate single motherhood with the same determination she'd brought to everything else. Now, sitting in her small apartment with bills she couldn't pay and a job that barely qualified as employment, Lily felt the familiar weight of circumstances beyond her control. She could apply for other waitressing jobs, but most restaurants paid the same wages and offered the same challenges. She could look into going back to school, but single mothers working part-time rarely qualified for financial aid that covered both tuition and living expenses. She could ask for help from social services, but pride and experience had taught her that government assistance came with complications that sometimes made survival more difficult rather than easier. Or she could do what she'd always done, figure out a way to make impossible situations work somehow. At 8 years old, Emma was old enough to understand that money was tight, but young enough to believe her mother could fix anything. That faith was both a blessing and a burden that kept Lily awake at night, calculating and recalculating numbers that refused to add up correctly. Tomorrow she'd start looking for additional work, maybe weekend shifts at another restaurant, or evening hours cleaning offices. Maybe she could find someone who needed sewing done. She'd learned to alter clothes by necessity and had discovered she was good at it. She'd figure something out. She always did. But tonight she allowed herself to feel the weight of it all. The exhaustion of being solely responsible for another person's well-being. The fear that one more crisis might be the thing that finally broke their small family's ability to stay afloat. The loneliness of making every decision alone. Robert Chen found the boy 3 days later sitting in the same corner booth where he'd observed the quiet exchanges between child and waitress. This time, the boy was alone and empty-handed. No brown paper bag, no careful secreting of food into a backpack. Just a small figure staring out the rain-streaked window with the patience of someone who'd learned that waiting was sometimes all you could do. Robert approached carefully. 40 years of working with children in difficult circumstances had taught him that trust was earned through action, not words, and that adults who moved too quickly often scared away the very people they were trying to help. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, gesturing to the opposite side of the booth. The boy looked up with large, serious eyes that seemed older than his face suggested they should be. "It's not my table," he said quietly. Robert slid into the worn vinyl seat. "I'm Robert. What's your name?" "Marcus." "Have you eaten today, Marcus?" The boy's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture, a wariness that suggested he'd been asked this question before by people who had complicated motivations for asking. "I'm okay," Marcus said, which wasn't an answer. Robert signaled the current waitress, a young woman who clearly didn't possess Lily's intuitive understanding of what Marcus needed. "Could we get a menu, please?" When the waitress left, Robert leaned forward slightly. "I've been watching someone take care of you here, a lady with brown hair who always seems to have extra food that needs a good home." Marcus glanced toward the kitchen, then back at Robert. "She's nice, but she doesn't work here much anymore." "Do you know why?" "Got in trouble for feeding me." Marcus said it matter-of-factly, like he was reporting the weather rather than describing an injustice that had cost a kind person her livelihood. Robert felt something cold and angry settle in his chest. "Where do you live, Marcus?" "With my grandma. She's sick, though. Sleeps a lot." "What about your parents?" "Mom's dead. Dad left before I was born." Again, delivered with the kind of casual acceptance that suggested Marcus had learned not to expect life to be fair or easy. "Who takes care of you when your grandma's sleeping?" Marcus shrugged. "I take care of myself, mostly. I know how to make sandwiches and use the microwave, and I know to be quiet when she's resting." The picture Robert was assembling was heartbreaking and unfortunately familiar. An elderly guardian whose health couldn't support the demands of caring for an active child. A boy who'd learned independence out of necessity. A family system that was functioning, barely, without adequate support. "Would you like something to eat now?" Robert asked. Marcus hesitated. "I don't have money." "That's okay." "I do." They ordered grilled cheese and tomato soup, comfort food that arrived hot and smelled like childhood should taste. Robert watched Marcus eat with the careful efficiency of someone who never knew when the next meal might come. "The lady who used to bring you food," Robert said casually. "Lily. Do you know where she lives?" Marcus looked up from his soup. "Why?" "Because I think she deserves to know that her kindness mattered, that you appreciated what she did. She didn't do it to get thanked. She did it because I was hungry." The simple truth of it hit Robert like a physical blow. Here was a child who understood generosity better than most adults, who recognized that the purest kindness was the kind that expected nothing in return. "You're right," Robert said. "But sometimes good people end up in bad situations because they put others first. Sometimes they need help too." Marcus finished his soup and sat back in the booth, studying Robert with the kind of careful assessment that suggested he was trying to determine whether this stranger could be trusted with important information. "She has a little girl," Marcus said finally. "I saw them together once at the grocery store. The little girl was asking for cereal, and Lily said they had to wait until next week." Robert felt the picture becoming clearer. A single mother working multiple jobs to support her child, giving away food she probably couldn't afford to spare, now facing even more financial pressure because of her generosity. "Marcus, what if I told you I might be able to help Lily get a better job? One where she could help lots of kids who are hungry, not just you." "What kind of job?" Robert pulled a business card from his wallet. "I run an organization that helps children and families who are struggling. We provide food, clothing, educational support. We also help parents find stable employment." Marcus studied the card like he was reading something written in a foreign language. Would she still be able to help kids? It would be her entire job, helping kids. For the first time since Robert had approached the table, Marcus smiled. She'd like that. She's good at taking care of people. That evening, Robert sat in his office reviewing Lily's employment history, which he'd obtained through the kind of professional networks that made background research possible. What he found confirmed everything he'd observed. A young woman who'd sacrificed her own education to care for family, who'd chosen stability over ambition to provide for her daughter, who'd maintained steady employment despite circumstances that would have defeated less determined people, and who'd given away food to hungry children even when doing so cost her the job she needed to survive. She was exactly the kind of person he'd been looking for. Someone who understood need from the inside, but had never let hardship harden her heart. Someone who chose kindness even when kindness was expensive. Robert found Lily's address through the same professional networks that had provided her employment history, but approaching her required more delicacy than finding her had. He understood that people in difficult financial situations often viewed unsolicited help with suspicion, and rightfully so. Too many offers of assistance came with strings attached or expectations that turned generosity into obligation. So he waited until Friday evening, when she'd be getting off her shortened shift at Rosie's, and positioned himself casually near the bus stop she used for her commute home. When Lily emerged from the diner, Robert could see immediately that the past week had taken its toll. Her shoulders were set with the kind of tension that comes from carrying more weight than they were designed to handle. Her uniform was still neat, but her expression was that of someone who'd been calculating and recalculating numbers that refused to add up correctly. "Excuse me," Robert said as she approached the bus stop. "Are you Lily?" She turned with the wariness of someone who'd learned that strangers rarely brought good news. "Do I know you?" "Not exactly. My name is Robert Chen. I've been watching you at Rosie's diner." Lily took a step back, clearly alarmed by the idea of being observed without her knowledge. Robert raised his hands peacefully. "I apologize. That came out wrong. I'm not following you or anything threatening. I've been coming to the diner regularly, and I noticed something beautiful. The way you've been taking care of Marcus." Understanding dawned in Lily's eyes, followed immediately by defensive concern. "I don't know what you're talking about. The little boy who sits in the corner booth, the food you've been leaving for him, the kindness you've shown without expecting anything in return." Lily's defenses went up like shields. "If you're from the health department or social services, I can explain. I'm neither. I run a nonprofit organization that provides services to children and families in need. I've been looking for someone to help manage our food distribution program, and I think you'd be perfect for the position." The bus arrived before Lily could respond, and Robert watched her board with an expression that suggested she thought he might be running some kind of elaborate scam. He tried again the following Monday, this time approaching her at the small laundromat where she spent her evenings doing alterations for extra income. "The job offer is real," he said without preamble, settling into the plastic chair beside her sewing station. $45,000 a year, full benefits, and a mission that involves making sure children like Marcus get regular meals." Lily looked up from the hem she was adjusting. "Why me? I don't have nonprofit experience. I don't have a college degree. I'm just a waitress who got in trouble for giving away leftover food. Because you understand the problem from both sides. You know what it's like to struggle financially, and you know what it's like to see a child go hungry. Most importantly, you chose to help even when helping cost you something you couldn't afford to lose." Robert leaned forward, hoping she could hear the sincerity in his voice. "Lily, I've spent 20 years working in social services. I've met hundreds of people who talk about caring for children in need. Very few of them would have done what you did, quietly, consistently, without recognition or reward." Lily set down her sewing. "Mr. Chen, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I can't accept charity. I won't be anyone's project or poster child for overcoming adversity. It's not charity, it's employment. You'd be earning the salary through your work, and believe me, it would be real work. Managing food distribution, coordinating with partner organizations, overseeing volunteer programs. We need someone who understands the dignity of the people we serve because they've stood in those shoes themselves. I don't want to make problems for anyone. I just need a job that pays enough for me to take care of my daughter." Robert understood her resistance. Pride was often the last possession people had when everything else had been stripped away, and asking her to give up that pride felt cruel even when the alternative was continued struggle. What if I told you about the organization first? Let you decide if it's something you'd want to be part of, regardless of your personal situation. Over the next hour, Robert described the Riverside Community Foundation, the food pantries they operated, the after-school programs they funded, the emergency assistance they provided to families in crisis. He talked about the children they served, many of whom reminded him of Marcus, and the parents they supported, many of whom reminded him of Lily. "We're opening a new community center next month," he said. "It'll have a commercial kitchen for meal preparation, classrooms for job training programs, and childcare facilities so parents can attend services without worrying about their children's safety." Lily listened with the kind of focused attention that suggested she was hearing possibilities she hadn't allowed herself to imagine. "What would my responsibilities be?" "Initially, managing food distribution and intake coordination. Eventually, as you learn the organization, possibly overseeing family services more broadly. We believe in promoting from within when people show aptitude and dedication." "I'd need to think about it." "Of course. Take all the time you need." Robert left his business card and walked away, hoping he'd planted seeds that would grow into opportunity rather than pressure. Behind him, Lily sat surrounded by other people's clothes that needed mending, contemplating the possibility that her own life might be capable of similar repair. The attack came on a Thursday night when Lily was walking home from her second job at the alteration shop. She'd stayed late to finish a wedding dress that needed to be ready for Saturday, and the streets were emptier than usual for 10 o'clock. The bus had broken down 3 blocks from her stop, leaving her with a longer walk than she'd planned through a neighborhood that felt safer during daylight hours. She was thinking about tomorrow's schedule, daycare pickup, grocery shopping with the $23 left in her weekly budget, maybe another hour of sewing if Emma went to bed early, when footsteps behind her began matching her pace. At first, Lily told herself it was coincidence, someone else walking home from work, following the same route toward the apartment complex where half the neighborhood's service workers lived, because it was the only housing they could afford. But when she turned left at Mason Street and the footsteps turned with her, her heart began beating faster. When she slowed down and the footsteps slowed too, she knew she was in trouble. "Hey, lady," a voice called from behind her. "Wait up." Lily kept walking, clutching her purse tighter and calculating the distance to her building. 2 blocks, maybe 3 minutes if she walked quickly without seeming to run. "I said wait up." The voice was closer now, aggressive, in a way that made her skin crawl. She risked a glance back and saw a young man in a hooded sweatshirt, moving with the kind of predatory focus that suggested he'd done this before. Lily started walking faster. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Just give me the purse and nobody gets hurt." The irony would have been funny if it hadn't been terrifying. Her purse contained exactly $12, an expired coupon for diapers Emma no longer needed, and a collection of receipts from purchases she couldn't afford but had made anyway. Hardly worth mugging someone over. But the young man behind her didn't know that, and Lily understood that desperation made people dangerous in ways that logic couldn't predict. "Please," she said without turning around, "I don't have anything valuable. I'm just trying to get home to my daughter." "Everyone's got something. Turn around and hand it over." Lily felt panic rising in her throat, not just for herself, but for Emma. If something happened to her, who would pick up her daughter from daycare tomorrow? Who would make sure she had breakfast and clean clothes and help with homework? Single mothers didn't have the luxury of backup plans. "Listen," she said, stopping and turning to face her attacker. "I understand you need money. I've been there. But this isn't the way. Shut up and give me the purse." The young man stepped closer, and Lily could see that his eyes were too bright, his movements too erratic. Drugs, probably. Which meant reasoning with him was pointless, and running would only make him angrier. She was reaching for her purse strap when another voice cut through the night air. "I think the lady said she doesn't want to be bothered." Robert Chen stepped out of the shadows near the apartment building entrance, moving with the calm authority of someone who'd dealt with dangerous situations before. The would-be mugger spun around, clearly not expecting interference. "This isn't your business, old man." "Actually, it is my business. This lady is my friend, and I don't appreciate people threatening my friends." Robert was 55, and looked like he spent more time in boardrooms than street fights, but something in his voice made the young man hesitate. "Walk away," Robert said quietly. "Find another way to solve whatever problem you're trying to solve. This isn't it." For a moment, the three of them stood in the yellow pool of streetlight like actors in a play nobody had written yet. Lily pressed against the apartment building wall, the mugger calculating odds. Robert standing calmly like he dealt with situations like this every Tuesday. Then apparently deciding that an interrupted mugging wasn't worth the trouble, the young man cursed and disappeared back into the shadows he'd emerged from. Lily found herself shaking, adrenaline and relief making her legs unsteady. "Are you all right?" Robert asked, approaching slowly, like she was a frightened animal who might bolt if he moved too quickly. "I think so. What are you doing here?" "I live in the building across the street. I was taking out garbage when I heard voices and recognized yours." Lily looked around the dark street, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she'd been. How vulnerable she still was, every time she walked alone after dark, every time she worked late and had to navigate neighborhoods that weren't designed for safety. "Thank you," she said, meaning it more than the words could possibly convey. "Lily, this isn't sustainable. You're working multiple jobs, walking dangerous streets, trying to handle everything alone. Let me help." Standing there in the yellow streetlight, still shaking from fear and gratitude, Lily felt something crack open inside her chest. Not breaking, but opening. Like a door she'd kept locked, finally admitting that she couldn't carry everything by herself forever. "What did you mean earlier when you said you'd been looking for someone like me?" Robert's expression softened. "When I was 8 years old, my family immigrated here with nothing. My parents worked 3 jobs between them, but it still wasn't enough. We were hungry most of the time, and I was angry about it in the way children get angry when they don't understand why life has to be so hard." He paused, looking up at the apartment building where warm lights suggested families settling in for the night. "One day, the woman who ran the corner store near our apartment started leaving sandwiches where I could find them. Never said anything about it. Never made me feel like charity. Just quietly made sure I had something to eat when there wasn't enough food at home." Lily understood where this was going. She saved my life, not dramatically, but definitely. Made it possible for me to focus on school instead of hunger, to believe that people could be kind without expecting anything in return. Robert turned to look at her directly. "I've spent my entire career trying to pay that forward, building programs that help children and families in ways that preserve dignity while meeting real needs. But I've never found anyone who understood both sides of the equation the way you do. What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail? What if you succeed?" Standing there in the yellow streetlight, with the memory of kindness saved and kindness given swirling around them like visible warmth, Lily made a decision that would change everything. When do I start? How do you feel hearing this story? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe for Hidden Heroine to catch more amazing stories like this one. 6 months later, Lily stood in the main hall of the new Riverside Community Center, watching families stream through the doors for the official opening ceremony. The space buzzed with activity that felt like organized chaos. Children running between activity stations, parents filling out intake forms for various services, volunteers explaining programs in 3 different languages. But what struck Lily most was the atmosphere. This wasn't the sterile, institutional feeling of most social service organizations. This felt like a neighborhood gathering, like family. "Mama, look!" 8-year-old Emma appeared at her side, holding a drawing she'd made at the children's art station. "I drew our new office." The picture showed a building full of smiling stick figures, with special attention paid to what appeared to be the food distribution area, where a woman with brown hair was handing out packages to smaller figures. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Lily said, crouching down to Emma's level. "Do you like coming to work with me?" "I love it, and I like helping the other kids. Marcus taught me how to organize the toy closet by age groups." Lily looked across the room to where Marcus was indeed helping younger children select books from the new library section. At 9, he'd grown 3 inches and gained the kind of confidence that comes from having stable housing and regular meals. His grandmother's health had improved dramatically once she'd been connected with proper medical care and home support services. The stress of trying to care for Marcus while managing her own health had been slowly killing her. Relief from that responsibility had given her the energy to focus on healing. "Mrs. Grant?" A voice interrupted her thoughts. A young mother with twin toddlers was approaching, looking overwhelmed but hopeful. Someone said you might be able to help me with emergency food assistance? Absolutely, Lily replied, standing and extending her hand. I'm Lily. What's your situation? As they walked toward the intake area, the woman, Sarah, explained that she just left an abusive relationship and was staying at a shelter with her children. She had a job interview tomorrow for a position that could change everything, but she needed childcare and wasn't sure how to manage the logistics. The interview is at 10, but I'd need to be there by 9:30 to fill out paperwork. The shelter doesn't provide childcare during the day, and I can't afford to pay for it. Lily smiled. That's exactly why we're here. Let me introduce you to Maria. She runs our emergency childcare program. She can watch the twins during your interview, and if you get the job, we can help you find affordable, ongoing childcare options. The relief in Sarah's eyes was immediate and profound. Really? You can do that? Really? And Sarah? That feeling you have right now, like maybe things are going to be okay? Hold on to that. You're going to do great tomorrow. As Lily helped Sarah complete the necessary paperwork, she caught sight of Robert across the room, talking with a reporter from the local newspaper about the center's impact on the community. The key to our success, she heard him saying, is that our programs are designed by people who've experienced these challenges themselves. When you've been hungry, you understand the difference between charity that humiliates and assistance that empowers. After the reporter moved on, Robert approached Lily with the kind of satisfied expression that suggested the day had exceeded his expectations. How are you feeling about all this? He asked, gesturing around the bustling center. Overwhelmed, grateful, a little scared that I'm dreaming and going to wake up back in the diner. Not a dream. This is real. And it's just the beginning. The City Council approved funding for 2 more centers. We're going to need regional coordinators. Lily felt that familiar flutter of possibility mixed with terror. Growth meant opportunity, but it also meant responsibility for something larger than she'd ever imagined. One step at a time, Robert said, reading her expression. You've already proven you can handle this. As the evening wound down and families began gathering their children and their hope for better tomorrows, Lily helped lock up the building that had become the center of her new universe. Outside, Marcus waited with his grandmother, who'd come to pick him up after staying for the entire celebration. Thank you, the older woman said to Lily, for everything, for feeding him when I couldn't, for making sure he knew someone cared. Thank you for raising such a good boy, Lily replied. He taught me that kindness always comes back to you, just not always in ways you expect. If you believe that one act of kindness can change destiny, hit subscribe for Hidden Heroine and help us spread these heartwarming stories.